Thank you for joining me for the Red Fox Part 1. You'll need a 14 by 18 or 12 by 16 sheet of light gray velour paper, some pastels, new pastels and Rembrandts, and a white charcoal pencil and a dark 6B charcoal pencil, a black one. I'm going to transfer my image onto the sheet of paper and draw it with 9B graphite pencil, and then we'll begin. I've added some white pencil lines with the white charcoal pencil, and I've outlined the eyes and nose and other darker areas with a 6B charcoal pencil. So that creates a map that'll show through the initial layers of pastel. For my first base coat on my fox, I'm going to use a Rembrandt 411.5 burnt sienna. I'm going to avoid the white areas like around the mouth and underneath the mouth on the throat. So I'm going to avoid those areas of the coat. So you can see here that I'm laying in that first initial color for our red fox. Coming down the neck, using the same color. I use a half a stick and I sand it on one side, and I also use the end for a smaller area. Now on the areas that are white, I'm going to put in a base coat of 704.7 mouse gray. This creates a base layer, and we'll add the white hairs for the mouth and the throat later on in the project. But this just creates a base for those white hairs to go on. Now we're going to add a second layer over this first layer of red on the fox. And for that, we're going to use 231.5 gold ochre. And the gold ochre has a little more white in it, and it helps to smooth out the burnt sienna color that we put on first. You can see I'm using the end, the rounded end of this. Now I've outlined the eyes, nose, and inside of the ears with 229 black new pastel or a Cretacolor black lead. Here I'm using a 263 new pastel Indian red to add the darker colors of the fur around the eyes and other areas of the face. Now you can see I've sharpened my new pastels to a point, makes them easier to use. Here I'm using 343 Rust, which is redder, so I'm adding the redder color over the 263. I'm adding more rust in the ears. It's 343. Being careful to use my pastel to add strokes in the direction that the hair grows. So I'm just adding some red to these ears. Now here I've switched back to my 263 to add a little darker red-brown color to the hair in the ear. Here I'm switching back to the rust and using that in between the eyes. I'm also using the rust on the top of the head between the ears. It's a pretty red color. And I'm going to use it in the ear, on the edge of the ear. On the side of the face, and a bit over the eyes as well. Now I'm switching back to the 263 to add the darker red-brown in a few of these places, just deepening the color. I'm not covering as much area with the 263 Indian Red as I did with the rust. But you can see that the darker colors help create dimension to the face. Now I'm going to use a light coat of the 411.5 and gently go over the colors I just placed to kind of blend it together. Use 209 dark gray to darken around the eyes, or you can use 223 burnt umber. And if you don't have those, use 353 cordovan. So I'm using the burnt umber to darken the red. So we're gradually going darker in these areas. And you can see it just adds a great deal of dimension to our fox. Now we're going to paint the nose of the fox with a 229 black NuPastel, or if you don't have that, you can use a Create-A-Color black pastel lead, which is a stick, and it does quite well at covering. Here I'm using the stick to outline the nose very carefully. And here I'm using a blue pastel pencil, or you can use a blue pastel to add a highlight on the nose. And add a bright white spot of NuPastel on the nose for the highlight. Now here I'm using a 213 Sanguine red to add a little brighter red, just a little bit, around the eyes, around the edge of the head. This is a little 343 rust. I know it looks kind of overwhelmingly red white right now, but we're going to add more highlights to this, which is going to cover up a lot of that red. So we want to get a nice red base coat in first. I'm going to use my white charcoal pencil to go around the outside edge of the fox's nose. And then I'm going to use my 211 white NuPastel to add some hair, using the edge to add some hair. You see I'm using the very edge to the fox's mouth and the bottom lip. So I'm making strokes. To show the hair on his muzzle. I can also use a 2B white Conte stick, which is a little smaller. So whichever is more comfortable for you. Now I'm continuing to add the white hair with the edge of my white pastel stick. Or if it's easier for you, you can use a pointed tip. Now I get that sharp point on my pastels with a M&R brass 2-hole sharpener that you can get from Amazon. So I'm continuing to add the white hair under the chin of the fox. I'm using my white charcoal pencil to add some sharp white hairs in the fur. Now using the Create a Color black lead, I'm adding the little whisker holes and I'm going to add the black whiskers. Do it with one pull of your pencil. You don't want to go back over it. It'll get it kind of messy looking. And we'll do the ones on the other side after we color in the background. So I'm adding a little dark brown here with 353 cordovan. I'm using that on the edges as well. I'm adding more dark brown with 353 around the eyes and on the edges of the face. We're going to add some light hairs on the fox's face. I'm going to use that with the edge of my NuPastel 276 buff. I'm adding a few short cream color hairs, and the buff is perfect for this. Now, if you're more comfortable with a pencil, I'm going to use the Conte pencil number 47, which is Naples yellow, to put some hair on the fox's face. Now I'm going to use this 2B Conte white to add some brighter white hairs onto the fox's face. Be very careful about the direction. Pull the hairs out and away from the face. They curve outward, so be careful about that when you're adding your hair. Now I'm doing the same thing, but the hairs are much shorter down the nose. I'm using the white to add some short, light hairs. And you'll see me rub those in with my finger, just kind of soften them. I'm adding some more white. And there's some little tiny white hairs on the edge of the face, so I'm going to go ahead and put those in. And when we put our background in, they're going to show through the background. Now I'm also going to use my $2.99 light gray NuPastel. It's gray, so it's not as bright as the white, even though it looks fairly bright here on the fox, but it's a nice, subtle color. It's not quite as bright. I'm going to use it especially in the ears. Now here I've gotten a couple of the hairs a little too bright, so I can go over that with my graphite pencil and kind of separate the hairs and dull them down a little bit. You can color right over them, and it grays them down and blends them in nicely. I'm adding the white hair to the inside of the ear with the 2B Conte stick, the edge, and I'm pulling them in towards the center of the ear very carefully. I'm going to add a little red here with the rust down at the base of the ear. Darken that with the Cordovan 353. use a little bit of that sanguine red to make it a little redder. Add a little variety. Now this is my white charcoal pencil. I'm able to pull out some bright, crisp, fine hairs. And then I'm going to use the Create a Color pastel pencil to darken the top of the ear. A little white around the outside edge of the ear. And continue to add hair with my 2B Conte stick. Also adding hair with the 47 Conte pencil Naples yellow. Now to separate those hair and make it a little darker, I'm using the Create a Color pencil. Which is really nice. This makes it a little darker and separates things. So I go back and forth. This is the red pastel. And the Conte 47 Naples yellow. So you add hair and go back and forth until you get it the way you want it. Now I'm going to use the white to add, and the black. First I'm going to outline it with black before adding the white hair. Using my light gray to get the edge, the outside edge of that ear. Using the 47 Conte pencil. And carefully adding the white hair inside the ear with the 2B Conte stick. I'm going to use a little bit of the 263 to darken it and the 343 to add a little red in there. Blend it. We don't want too big a difference in color. And then my white charcoal pencil to pull out a few sharp hairs. Now we're going to paint the eye. I'm going to base coat the eye with NuPastel 383 Van Dyke Brown. I'm just putting a light color over both irises. If you don't have Van Dyke Brown, you can use 253 Cocoa Brown. We just want a medium brown color. Now I've already darkened the pupils with 229 black. And remember that the fox's pupils are more cat-like. They're more like a slit than oval. Now I'm going to lighten the area on the left side. I'm going to use that with a coat of 233 raw sienna. Kind of brightens it up. It's a nice yellow. It's good for a lot of things. Then we're going to add a dark color under the lid and right around the iris, and we're going to use 263 for that shadow. You could also use 353 Cordovan. And a touch of red is very exciting in the eye, so I'm going to use our red 213, or you could use 266 to add just a touch of red in the eye. A little bit, not a lot. And then for the highlight, we're going to use 207 Chrome Yellow. And that's just a smidge down at the bottom. And see how those eyes just light up. And then for the catch light in the eye, we would use a 211 white, or you could use your white charcoal pencil. Now I'm going to darken the pupil with my Create-A-Color pencil and outline the eyes a little bit, make them a little darker. The pastel that we've been applying is kind of, the dust has gotten on them. So we're going to brighten them up, make them a little deeper. Putting that 211 white for the catch light and also in the corner of the eyes. Background around the fox's head before we work more on him. Now for my base coat, I'm going to use 727.1 blue gray. So it's a very light blue-gray color, and I'm going to go carefully around the head. Over that, I'm going to add a little 548.7 blue-violet. So we want this is a winter scene, but I want to add color to it. Now I'm only going to work out 4 or 5 inches. I'm not going all the way to the edge of the paper, but just like I said, 4 or 5 inches out, because your hand will get in it and you'll start wiping this color all over your fox, and you don't want to do that. I'm adding more of the 727.1 blue-gray and the 548.7 blue-violet over the top of the fox. You can see I'm turning it up on its end, which helps me work in close to the face. But that's, I know you can't exactly see because my hand's in the way, but that's what I'm doing. Now the next color I'm going to add is 536.9 Violet. So we're getting a deeper, richer color, and I'm adding that around the fox. Now we're going to start to be more abstract with the way we're adding the colors. They're not going to be like solid all over. I'm not going to add this violet everywhere. You can follow the drawing or you can create your own background. I want this up under his face. And if I get too much there, I can blend it out with one of the lighter colors. In this case, I'm using the 548-7. I could also use the 727 light blue-gray. And I like to blend it with my finger. I like to push it in a bit. And the next color I'm going to add is 371.8 Permanent Rose Deep. So I'm going for the pinky violet color for the snow. And if it gets too bright, you can tone it down with 704.7 Mouse Gray, which is a medium gray in your box, which will kind of tone down the colors. This is more light blue-gray. So I'm going to work back and forth with these colors to get the background that I want. Turn my paper upside down, and I'm using the same colors that I was using before on the background to color in around the fox's head. Now I flip my paper right side up, and I am adding color around my fox, the same ones that we've been using. I've got 727. The one I have in my hand now is 536.9. And I'm just working around his head and his ears and putting in these colors. Then if it gets too much, here I'm using the 7047 Mouse Gray. I'm kind of dulling it down. It looks a little bright right there, and I want it to be a little darker, so I dulled it down. So I'm just continuing to add those colors all around the outside of my fox. Here I'm drawing out the black hair, some of the whiskers into the background with my Create a Color black pastel lead. Thank you for joining me for part 1. And stay tuned for part 2 coming up next.